Our topic was colonization and missionary work in the Victorian era. During this era, Britain expanded its influence greatly by gaining a large number of colonies throughout the world. According to Queen Victoria's definition of colonization, the purpose is to protect the poor natives and advance civilization. Britain used a large military force in their colonies, and about half of their military was overseas at any given time, protecting the colonies. British colonies were unlike many other colonies because they were temporary and settlers were not there permanently, but instead lived there temporarily for business purposes. Two of the most prominent British colonies were India and the West Indies. During this era, India was regarded as the jewel in the crown of Britain, meaning that it was the most important colony. However, settlers oppressed native Indians with ideas of white superiority, the white man's burden, and benevolent despotism, meaning that British settlers felt superior to the natives whose land they had taken. In India, there was a lack of settlers because only British businessmen moved to India. Because of the oppression that native Indians felt, they mutinied against British rule in the 1850s. In the West Indies, oppression was also very prevalent. Although in the Victorian era slavery was abolished, former slaves were still part of the lower class and did not have the same rights as white British settlers. In the West Indies, there was a complicated social hierarchy between white settlers, black settlers, and people with mixed cultures or races. The West Indies held many important plantations that grew sugar, tobacco, and various other crops for the British Empire. Besides these two prominent colonies, England held power in places such as Canada, Austria, New Zealand, Asia, the Mediterranean, and the Western Hemisphere, and Africa. In their colonies in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, settlers and natives had more rights than in many other colonies as they had the power to rule themselves. Missionary work was very popular during the Victorian era. Missionaries from Britain would spread Western culture and Christianity to the natives, which relates to the white man's burden, as they felt it was their duty to spread their religion and their culture to the natives who they thought were inferior to them. Most missionary work was motivated by religion and the belief that they could improve the lives of many natives. They founded churches, schools, and translated the Bible into new languages. Additionally, missionaries helped record languages that previously had never been recorded, only spoken. Colonization and missionary work relate heavily to Jane Eyre. Bertha Mason, Mr. Rochester's wife, was from Jamaica. Regarding his stay in Jamaica, Rochester states that he was sent out to Jamaica to espouse a bride already courted for him. And while telling the story of his marriage to Bertha, he represents the arrogant attitudes of the British and the motives they had to settle in places such as the West Indies. Bertha's family wished to secure her marriage to Rochester because he was of a good race, meaning that since he was British and she was and she wasn't. He was superior to her. Additionally, St. John, Jane's cousin, represents the missionary work that was very prevalent in the Victorian era. He was very strong in his faith and believed that his calling was to be a missionary in India, and this motivates much of his relationship with Jane. He believes that she has what it takes to become a missionary's wife and frequently asks her to come with him to India to do the work that he believes God has called him to do. When he goes to India, he spreads his religion and the word of the Bible to the British colonies there. He believes that people are formed for labor and goes overseas to do missionary work.